after everything we've learned on the launch attempts and closer to launch than we were, whatever, a year and a half ago when the decision was made that it was okay to launch at night. And everyone is comfortable with launching in the evening, and I think everyone feels really good about the launch. I'll say what I've said multiple times. Everybody asks, are you confident in going after a launch attempt? If we weren't confident, we wouldn't roll out. If we weren't confident, we wouldn't start the countdown when we do. So, yeah, we're confident moving forward. I do want to reflect on the fact that this is a challenging mission. We've seen challenges just getting all our systems to work together, and that's why we do a flight test. It's about going after the things that can't be modeled, and we're learning by taking more risk on this mission before we put crew on there. And those challenges, this complex of a vehicle and where we're flying and how we're getting there. We'll continue to look at things on the vehicle, on SLS performance as we go uphill to make sure we're getting the performance and the controllability out of all the propulsive elements on the first stage, and our ICPS performance, raising the perigee and giving us the TLI translunar injection that we need. And then, of course, Orion, getting through all its deployments of the solar arrays and testing of its propulsion system. The good part in all this is our teams have continued to grow and learn about the vehicle, and we're confident. But like I say, it's a flight test. We'll continue to look for every bit of sign everywhere along the missions. We focus a lot about getting to T0, but I think the flight control team, Rick and Judd and Mike Serafin and mission management have given you some of the things that we look for during the mission too, to meet our objectives of understanding performance and testing the heat shield and getting the vehicle back. So the preparation have gone really well since getting back to the VAB, and we've certainly had unexpected things through this whole flow, including the hurricane. So just a little over a week from getting that countdown started and continuing back on this path towards this challenging flight test. So with that, let me turn over to Cliff and let him fill you in on what's been going on in the VAB.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's really great to be back here, ready to roll back out to the pad. Since rolling back to the VAB for Hurricane Ian, the team has been hard at work. The work in the VAB has gone smoothly, and we've been able to protect the rocket from the hurricane, and we've been able to get into our inspections and make repairs to the TPS and replace FTS hardware, or flight termination system hardware there, recharge the Orion batteries as well as our secondary payload batteries, and we've even replaced some of the payload batteries. The execution by the team has been excellent. Our initial focus was on gaining access to the vehicle so we could get to work on the second stage, which was our critical path. Work included battery changeouts, transducer replacement, and other testing. As this work was proceeding, we were changing out core flight termination system components, core stage flight termination system components, including the batteries, and as well as we changed out the booster batteries. This past weekend, we have performed our flight termination system testing. We started retracting our platforms. We're actually retracting our final platform now, and the crawler transporter is now in the high bay underneath the mobile launcher. In addition to the operational work going on in High Bay 3, our launch team has been preparing for the next attempt and actually went through a full simulation, launch simulation. Right now, we are on target for our rollout call to stations. Will be at 6 p.m. tonight, and our expected first motion is 1 minute after midnight tonight. Let's see, through the efforts of the team here in the VAB, we have been able to gain about a 1 day of margin for the pad operations to account for, as Jim mentioned, weather earlier, but that gives them some margin to really help our probability of hitting that November 14th first launch attempt. Also, at the pad, we'll be refreshing some science samples for our space biology payload. And then right now, we are very confident in our team and our systems. And we're looking forward to getting back out to pad and getting launched on the 14th. Charlie will be here again talking around the mission management team L-2 timeframe about specific launch countdown items. And that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Cliff. We'll now get into the question and answer portion of today's call. You can press *1 to get added to the queue and *2 if you'd like to be removed from the queue. I do also want to note that we have Mark Berger from the launch, who's the launch weather officer with Space Launch Delta 45. We have him here because, as Jim noted, we do have a storm we're watching, so Mark can help with any weather-related questions. Let's see, your lines are on mute, and the operator will open and close your mic when we come to your question. And with that, we'll get started with Marcia Dunn with the Associated Press.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. Probably for Jim, what do you lose by launching at night? The cons, especially if things don't go well, and how long would you have to wait for the next daylight opportunity for launch? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Marcia. I think we have the visual references obviously are what you lose in terms of launching at night, but obviously we have IR cameras. We're going to get some visuals because just launching at night and the big fire coming out the back is going to help light things up for us too. So it's just some of those visual images, but we have a great number of cameras on here that we'll still get shots from, and critical elements we'll see the things that we need, and then we get back to the daylight launches. Of course, I don't have my notebook here, but the daytime launches start, I think, around the 22nd in terms of when they would be daytime launches. We don't have access to those days in the window right now. The Holiday Airspace Release Program that is run by the FAA. Our next opportunity beyond the 16th and 19th that we have clear is the 25th. We'd have to, again, work with our federal partners if we needed to open up one of those days to have access to launch in.
Our next question is from Bill Harwood of CBS News.
Hey, thanks very much, guys. And this is for either one of you. You get asked this question at every one of these briefings, but I'll ask it again for the record. I know you've said the boosters are good as is for the duration of the period, but is there a definitive date by which you have to launch or you can't? Or is this simply open-ended based on your analysis of the boosters? I'm just curious if there's some limit on how long you can stay at the pad before you really have to do something. Thanks.
Yeah, let me give kind of the overall limited life thing, Bill, and I appreciate you asking it because we should keep it at the forefront of our minds, and I can tell you we did do that, and Cliff can maybe give you an example or two we did going back to the VAB this time that, as I've said, we have a list, a number of things on a limited life item list. Each of them have a different revisit date. That's my term. When we have to go back and redo the analysis and look at the assumptions in the analysis, and it's really more a function of when do we feel like those assumptions are no longer good, and the boosters fall into that category. I think I would be doing our team and you a disservice by saying we can just go forever, because I don't think that's the case. I think we look at the analysis every time with a different set of lenses, thinking about what else could have changed. Just like we looked at the roll decision today, and we're talking about 40 knot winds, potential 40 knot winds for the storm. Well, how's that compare to what we looked at for Hurricane Ian, and how's that look for the duration? How's that factor into the fatigue life or the cycles on there? So I think we look at it in the way that we laid out in the analysis, and we look at the frequency that we need, and we look at it with the fresh view of things. And don't forget that we also have our independent technical authorities that are part of our team that are designed to make sure we're not all in a group think and saying that everything's fine. Now I trust our team, our mainline team, to do that, but we also have that check and balance. So Cliff, anything from a limited life that you want to talk about that you looked at in the VAB this time?
Yeah, Jim. So as you know, the batteries, particularly our flight termination system batteries, have a limited life on them, and we changed those out. Just to add to the boosters, we did do measurements even before we stacked, just in case we got into a situation where we needed to extend the life there, where we actually measured the propellant slump, as it was called, on each segment, so that could benefit an analysis if we got into this situation. So that is certainly paying dividends now. But like I said, batteries we changed out. We did have our sister programs look throughout their limited operating life items and make sure we were capturing everything required as far as changeouts. But batteries and our command receiver decoders also we changed out. So we took a look at all the hardware and made sure we were capturing those things to make sure we didn't run out of life on those.
Okay, our next question is from Eric Berger of Ars Technica.
Hi, thanks very much for doing this. A couple questions. I think one maybe for Jim, maybe both for Jim, I'm not sure, but can you help set expectations for this launch period? How confident should we be or not in Artemis I launching, in the current launch period that ends November 26th? And then following that up, if you don't launch this month, would you stay on the pad for the December period if you could get approval from the range and had no reason, like a major leak fix or something like that, to go back to the VAB? So would you try to stay on the pad basically for the December launch period? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. It's part of my answer goes with what I said up front in terms of being confident. I think we have three good attempts lined up right now, 14th, 16th, and 19th. I think what we've learned in every wet dress, our 2 launch attempts, and the tanking test help build our confidence. The unknowns are, I don't mean that as a cop out, but that's certainly something that can get us. I think when we're in that the final throes of the launch count, and one thing can kick us out. One telemetry parameter can kick us out. We want to make sure that we're prepared for that. That goes into sometimes picking a longer launch window so that we have time to recycle and recover from it if we can, based on what it is. I think, again, I don't think we would roll out if we didn't feel confident we could get there. We're trying to protect 3 launch attempts at least in this period. I know I've gone back and forth with the team on their desire to keep 3, which I respect, and I'm not just talking about this one, just when we've talked about other launch attempts. And then as far as staying on the pad, I think we obviously were fortunate that the range heard us the last time, listened to our technical data, listened to the rationale, and I think if we were faced with that again and we didn't go in this launch period, we've talked about how a roll takes cycles and out of the tank, out of the vehicle, I should say, and the fatigue side of that. So we looked to do everything we could to protect that. And if we don't get there, I'm sure we'd talk internally about our willingness and readiness to go work with the range.
Okay, next up we have Emily Speck with Fox Weather.
Hey, my question is for Mark Berger. I just wanted to check in and see what weather items you're keeping an eye on for rollout, and then looking ahead to the launch window, Do you have any concerns with the two systems in the tropics right now? Yeah.
Okay, Emily, good afternoon. So as far as rollout tonight, things look almost ideal for us in terms of the weather constraints here, really not tracking any concerns during the overnight hours, maybe a couple of showers, but that's certainly not any sort of impediment to our roll operation. So for tonight, everything looks good there. Now, as far as looking ahead here over the next week or so, of course, as mentioned, we are monitoring the potential development of at least an area of low pressure somewhere near Puerto Rico or just south of there this weekend. That will slowly move to the northwest over the course of early next week. And so there's still a lot of inconsistencies on exactly where that may end up and really whether or not it even does acquire significant tropical characteristics to even become a named storm. That's all very much out in play at this point. In fact, the National Hurricane Center just has it as a 30% chance of becoming a named storm. However, that being said, the models are very consistent on developing some sort of a low pressure, and regardless of whether or not it's named, pretty much what we're targeting is that for middle part of next week, especially as we go Monday night into potentially Tuesday night or early Wednesday, us having the highest impacts from that particular system as it approaches the Florida Peninsula. And so that may look like sustained winds of around 25 knots and potentially some rain squalls that achieve a wind gust of 35 to 40 knots. But again, those are well within our constraints as far as riding out. So again, we'll have impacts from that in terms of the wind, but again, we're not looking at any likelihood at this point of seeing a strong system emerge out of this. However, again, we are continuing to watch that for potential impacts into the middle of next week.
Thank you. Next, we have Kenneth Chang with the New York Times. Ken, can you hear us? Okay, we will come back to Ken. Let's go ahead to Tim Fernholz with Quartz.
Hello, thank you for taking my question. Two questions, actually. One, I was curious if we could get an update on the CubeSats. I know there might have been some battery or life-limiting issues with those. Are those ready to go for launch? And then just a question, we're tracking right now a Chinese rocket stage that is sort of tumbling back to Earth. I know that the SLS core stage gets disposed of, and I wonder if you could just speak briefly about how you ensure that it does so safely. Thanks.
Cliff, you want to take the CubeSat one?
I sure do. Thanks, Tim, for the question. Yeah, so the CubeSats, we did recharge them when we got back into the VAB. We did that on October 13th, and that should get us to where they're good for about 5 months. And yeah, so that was about a day-long process of hooking up and then recharging them. But they are charged and ready to go. Thank you.
And to the second part of your question, Tim, on the disposal of SLS, NASA, with the outer space, starting with the Outer Space Treaty and going through the Artemis Accords and our internal documentation, we have very clear direction to safely dispose of what we put in orbit. SLS has a very well-defined plan for disposal for all the different trajectories that it flies based on when we fly, and that disposal plan, puts the vehicle on a trajectory that after Orion separates, puts it on a trajectory to do a safe disposal, and where it doesn't burn up, it's in an area of the ocean where it won't affect anyone. But that is, I think, core to what NASA does, and is our responsibility to safely dispose of vehicles. And when we start from the get-go, we do that. And if there's an issue, as we've seen on a couple other instances, we correct that, and that's been from the get-go of SLS. That's been the plan.
Our next question is from Mike Howard with American Spectator.
Yes, thanks for taking the call. On those CubeSats, you mentioned, I guess this is for Cliff, that they had indeed been recharged good for 5 months. Is that all 10 CubeSats? I understood that only 4 had been recharged. Could you give us a blow-by-blow account on how the CubeSats stand as far as their charges go, and how long it'll take before we know which ones have actually got on mission? Thanks.
Right. So, again, Mike, thanks for the question. So there are 10 right now loaded on the vehicle inside the Orion stage adapter. And right now we recharged 5 for this to give them a new charge. Some of them cannot be charged from the vehicle through the ground support equipment and be recharged. So those are identified. I don't have the list in front of me of exactly which ones those are, but there are some that just by their design cannot be recharged through the GSE. So we recharged what could be recharged in the configuration we're in the VAB, and that's kind of where we are.
And Mike, if you can reach out by email, we are happy to send you a list of which items which payloads were recharged, if that would be helpful. Okay, our next question is from Ken Kramer with Space Up Close.
Hi, thank you for doing this, and hopefully everything will go well. I'd like to ask about the flight termination system batteries. Right, so you recharged them or replaced them. Can you tell us anything about the status of those batteries when you checked them? I mean, were they still pretty well charged? Did they meet the requirements that you needed for the Space Force, or what was their status? If you could clarify that a little, thanks.
Yeah, so Ken, I don't have the data on the batteries we removed in terms of their charge status once they were removed. As far as the batteries we did, the new batteries that went back in, that was all completed, the actual activation of those batteries earlier in October. And then we went ahead and changed them out, like I mentioned earlier, into the core stage flight termination system batteries were replaced. The booster flight termination system batteries were replaced as well. And again, those basically the booster has approximately 120 days of life on the batteries from activation, and the core stage have 90 days. So as far as what's in the vehicle now, we're obviously in very good shape. I don't have the data, again, right here to say what the charge was, after we removed them.
Next up, we have David Denault with About Space Today.
Thank you. I guess I'm still a little puzzled. We have an opportunity to see this in the daylight. And I heard your explanation. However, couldn't we have waited to a daylight launch? I mean, you had a short launch window to begin with. The daylights have extended hours just in case. So kind of help me understand why this rush to put this on the pad. Is it dollars that you have to consider? Is it personnel? Or could we have waited?
Yeah, so I guess, we're our goals, by the way, the 120-minute windows aren't just unique to daylight. We have those at nighttime as well. We don't see it as a barrier to getting the data that we need. In this launch period, we're limited by the days we can launch based on the FAA requirements that are put on us. And in the end, we're comfortable launching at night, and we feel like we're going to get the imagery that we need to track the vehicle, to understand what might come off the vehicle. We know there's going to be some of that, but we'll get that from the radar and the infrared imaging that we had. So from our perspective, it's it's okay to launch at night, and that's where our technical teams got to.
Our next question is from Jeff Faust with Space News.
Hey, good afternoon. Just a quick question on the FTS batteries. How long does the current certification on the batteries run to? I assume it goes through the upcoming three launch windows, but if you need to slip to the 25th, would you have to go back to the range and seek an extension as you did earlier? Thanks.
Right. So right now we are certified. The batteries are certified. Again, both the booster and the core stage batteries were activated in the second week of October timeframe, and the core stage batteries have a 3-month life on them. So that would put us into the January timeframe, and then the booster batteries have approximately 120-day life on them, and that would put them into February. So as far as covering launch periods 28 and 29, from an FTS standpoint, as far as the battery life, we'll be okay. We're good. And then obviously, like Jim said earlier, if it comes to it, and that would be something the NASA, would go forward to the range and discuss if they want to extend past the current 25-day waiver.
Next, we'll go to Brett Tingley with Space.com.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. I'm just wondering, following all of these scrub attempts and a lot of the public criticism of the program that's been out there in the media, what's morale like among the Artemis and SLS programs?
Hey, Cliff, why don't you talk about your team down there, and then I'd like to make a note at the end.
Okay, sure will. So, Brett, I would say from the standpoint of the Kennedy team, when we had to roll back from the hurricane, I will tell you it was disappointing. But what I will say is the team immediately got to work. Literally, when we were allowed on center after the hurricane, got to work. And the best way I would say, the enthusiasm and the efficiency of the team has been tremendous, outstanding, as a matter of fact, to where we were able to recommend to NASA leadership, November 14th date, and that was as soon as we rolled back, and that had a few days of margin in it, and we were able to keep that margin to where the team constantly performed, to very high level of expectations, and put us in a position now where we're ready to launch or roll out and get ready to launch on the 14th. So, we are back in terms of ready to go and excited, down here.
And I would just add overall that, these are a professional group of people who their first allegiance is to the hardware and doing things right. And when we give you all the discussions like this, I appreciate the questions and the ability to kind of address things like you just said. Hey, the criticisms that are thrown our way. We're spending taxpayer dollars. We should be open to criticism and answering questions, but it will never put us in the place of pushing too hard to launch too fast or making a bad decision. I think we're making decisions in along the lines that we've been asked to, that we've set up our processes to do, and the criticisms that come our way, I'll take 100% of them. And explain them. I can't say we're going to agree in the end, but I will always answer the critics that we have. And what I ask the teams to do, and I hope they do, is they just focus on getting the hardware done and doing it the right way. So thank you for the criticisms. It gives us a chance to tell our story, tell about the hard things we're doing. As I mentioned, this is a really difficult mission. And there's chance for things to go in anomalous ways, but our job's to figure it out, and our job's to do the right thing with this hardware, and that's what we're going to do every time. And we'll be here to answer your questions and criticisms every time too.
Thanks. Our next question is from Elizabeth Meary with Monarch Granger student newspaper.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for answering our questions today. I was wondering, what do you hope to discover through the Artemis program, and what impact do you hope to make on the next generation?
Wow. Can I answer one of the other critical questions first? That's a tough question. No, it's not. It's great. Thank you for being part of this, by the way. I'd like to learn more about your newspaper. What we're really hoping to discover is the history of the moon and how that relates to the history of Earth, and what we can learn about terrestrial planet formation and evolution. And we're going to do that by putting robotic missions and humans on the surface of the moon and doing strategic science that has been called out in our decadal surveys. And while we're there, we're going to operate systems in a partial gravity environment that will help us learn how to operate in that environment, which is very similar to Mars. So we're ready to send people onto Mars. And we're also going to operate in orbit of the moon to stage our missions from, to do science from, to look at space weather effects and test some of our systems there before we go on to the moon. And my hope from an impact perspective, and I talked about the science and strategic science that will happen, but honestly, my hope is that folks like you who are in school today, at all ages, can see themselves in the people that work on our programs, the people that we're going to land on the moon, and are inspired to go take on careers in engineering, math, or science, and take my spot or Cliff's spot one day.
Okay, we have another question from Bill Harwood with CBS News.
Yeah, hey, thanks, guys. And Jim, I mean, is there I just wanted to ask this booster question one last time, I promise, but is there a date that you guys just don't want to give us, or is it really open-ended at this point on booster lifetime? I mean, I know you guys always have an end date on stuff. I'm just wondering, what is it for the boosters as of today? Thank you.
Yeah, Bill, I don't have the limited life list here in front of me to tell you, like, when I answered your question earlier, to tell you like how frequently we do that analysis, or what that revisit date might be. So what I'd ask is let me work with John Honeycutt and his team on SLS and get you that revisit date or revisit time period and see what that date might be. Okay?
Hey, Jim, I do have some dates in front of me as far
great.
as the
Thanks.
The left and right hand motor segment stacked. It's when we did the original, when you stacked your first segment on the aft segment, you start a clock. That was originally 12 months, and it's currently been analyzed up to 23 months. And that expires, one piece expires on the 9th of December of this year, and the other one is the 14th of December of this year. And then there's a booster environmental exposure lolly as well that expires December 15th of this year.
Yeah, and then we'd go back into an analysis cycle to see where we could do that extension again, much like it was for the first one, as Cliff said. That was initially 12 months. Thanks, Cliff.
We'll go to Eric Berger with Ars Technica.
Hi, thanks for coming back to me. Just a question about sort of the impacts of Ian. Were there any damage to any Artemis facilities outside of the VAB? I know you probably did some pretty detailed inspections of the crawlerway, the launch pad. You haven't said anything, so I assume everything's fine, but I just wanted to clarify that sort of, what your posture was after the hurricane in terms of any damage to the site.
That from a Kennedy Space Center standpoint, no, there was no real damage. that impacted our ability to get back to work right away after the storm passed. From a vehicle standpoint, we rolled back into the VAB. The doors were shut, so all was well there. The pad was fine as well. So there was no damage to any of the exploration ground system facilities.
Our next question is from Marcia Dunn with the AP.
Yes, hi again. I'm wondering if the recent work in the VAB uncovered any potential hydrogen leak causes, any weak spots, smoking guns, anything else that you might have found to explain the rash of leaks that occurred with the early launch attempts and even the testing. And I'm wondering, too, what's the latest leading theory for the leaks? Is there anything in particular that seems to top the list? Thanks.
Let's see, Jim, I can talk, I guess, the work back in the VAB from the standpoint of that hydrogen leak. There's not really a smoking gun per se. We did not open that cavity back up in the VAB. As you recall, we did a tanking test at the pad to test the system out, and it really became a function of controlling the pressures with the hydrogen sphere, and being able to work those pressures to the point where we were able to then get the leak under control and then actually control things and how we load. And so that has gone into our procedures and how we'll attempt our next attempts. So like I said, we did not go into that area. We did not break that interface since that tanking test. And we feel pretty confident that we're through the loading procedures and controlling the pressures that we understand it much better now.
And our next question is from Mike Howard with the American Spectator.
Yeah, I'm back on board. Thanks. The question about when NASA will have an idea or be able to report out on which of the deployed CubeSats actually were able to get on target and stay viable. When can we expect that kind of a feedback?
Yeah, I think some of it is the answer. It depends. Some of the CubeSats that we weren't able to recharge, but just based on their configuration in the vehicle, no matter when we rolled back. Some of them, they may need to charge some. Their solar panels may need to gather enough sunlight to charge their batteries before they go, and that's really just going to be dependent on their state of charge when we deploy them. All the CubeSats have a communication plan with the Space Communication and Navigation Program at NASA that defines the support. They all have contingencies, so I don't know that the specifics. We can go see if there's a specific anticipated timeline, which I'm sure there is, but I will tell you it's probably got some variability in it, just the way CubeSats work, let alone ones that need some time to charge. So let us take the action, Rachel, if we could, to follow up there.
We will do that. And I don't believe we have any other questions in the queue, so we will go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. You can follow the rollout activities on the NASA Artemis blog, which is available at blog.nasa.gov/Artemis. And you can also watch the rollout activities on the Kennedy Space Center Newsroom YouTube channel. We'll have a live stream of the rocket in the VAB beginning at 6 p.m. tonight prior to its departure for the launch pad. And in addition, we will have a replay of this teleconference online later this afternoon. You can find that by visiting the Media Resources tab at nasa.gov/Artemis-1. And with that, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for your participation. Participants, you may disconnect at this time.
President Mike Pence will join the congressman on the campaign trail this afternoon. They'll hold a fireside chat at the Republican Party headquarters in Raleigh.
Both parties leaning on political star power to get voters out to the polls. President Biden and former Presidents Obama and Trump also hitting the campaign trail in the final push to next Tuesday. Wake Up Charlotte's Drew Petrimo has the latest from Washington.
Ben, polls show neck-and-neck races all across the country, and in this final push, big names are being called in to make a final pitch to voters. Overnight, two of the Democratic Party's most recognizable faces campaigning in key battleground states. President Joe Biden in Florida.
Let's be real clear about one important thing. This election is not a referendum. It's a choice. It's a choice between two vastly different visions for America.
Former President Barack Obama in Nevada.
That's why Democrats actually have plans to take on drug companies to lower prices, to get the oil industry to clean up its act, to pass laws to make housing more affordable.
Shall give them a big Georgia welcome.
Meantime, former Republican Vice President Mike Pence stumping in Georgia.
We got to re-elect Brian Kemp.
Former President Donald Trump will hold a rally in the Sunshine State on Sunday. Both parties deploying heavy hitters to states that will determine control of Congress. In 10 of the most closely watched Senate races, 5 are currently held by Republicans, 5 by Democrats.
If Republicans get one of the Democratic ones, Democrats have to counter with one of the Republican-held seats. And there's one state there for Democrats that looms above all the others just in terms of being a ripe target. It's Pennsylvania.
In the Keystone State, polls have Democratic Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman holding onto a slim lead against the Republican, Dr. Mehmet Oz. Nevada looking like Republicans' best chance to flip a seat, with a new poll showing a dead heat. On the issues, it's the economy, crime, abortion rights, and threats to democracy driving voters like Tony Figueroa to the polls.
I want to, have my own place, to call my own. Been saving up for that for years now. It just seems with inflation, that goal just seems a little more out of reach day by day.
In your eyes, in this election, it's democracy that's at stake, no?
Yes, it is, because it's become the truth versus lies. And when you have a binary situation, that's where you have a problem, when violence becomes the recourse to a voting democracy.
Across the country, candidates trying desperately to convince voters they have a plan to address these issues, hoping to tip the election in their favor in the final days of the campaign. Saturday is shaping up to be a big day in this final push. President Biden and former presidents Obama and Trump all scheduled to campaign in Pennsylvania on the same day. Reporting from Washington, I'm Drew Petrimo. Wake Up Charlotte.
In the wake of the pandemic, more people are searching for jobs that let them bring their pets to work, and plenty of workplaces are more than happy to accommodate. CNBC's Andrea Day reports on the new pet-friendly movement.
Can you get up? Good job. Christina Peru is searching for her first job out of college.
I'm looking for a job as a software developer.
Hi, baby. And what does she want?
To be able to take Zoe with me would be amazing.
She spent most of the pandemic taking classes from home, her dog Zoe by her side.
Good job. It automatically makes me feel so much better.
And says the last thing she wants now is to be separated from her best friend. So
I decided to look up pet-friendly workplaces.
Searches for pet-friendly office jobs spiked 300% over the past 3 years, and employers are listening. Here in Denver at the Catbird Hotel, they're testing out a pet-friendly program that allows employees to bring their dogs to work.
Good job, Porter.
We've gotten really positive response.
Walter Eisenberg is the CEO of Sage Hospitality Group. The group owns 60 hotels across the country, including Catbird.
I think as we continue to work through some of the details, we're going to be rolling this out company-wide.
In South Burlington, Vermont, at Ben & Jerry's company headquarters, furry friends have been coming to work for about a decade.
High five.
CEO Matthew McCarthy says other companies are now reaching out
to understand a bit more about our dog-friendly policies and how we do it.
The dogs here are called K9 to 5ers. They have full bios, even headshots, like Raffi.
My coworkers wanted to hang out with Raffi, which then made it much easier for me to meet a lot of people really quickly.
Good girl, this way.
The company is now redoing the office to make it even more canine friendly. We got a first look at these new plans, including white picket fences.
I have a hunch that part of that creativity and special sauce that we have at Ben & Jerry's is due in part to the dogs.
Hey, listen, there's nothing more that I would enjoy than having Scout with me every morning, but I would not be as good of a worker. It's just honest. I mean,
very distracted.
But maybe you'd be less stressed. Not that you're a stressed person. I would be less stressed if we had like a WCNC mascot pet.
What about if you brought your own pets?
No, Buddy, I could. Teddy would bark at everything, and he would totally stress me out.
Let's just have a whole zoo here.
That'd be so nice. It would be so nice.
Everybody. Well.
All right, now what's trending here in Charlotte this morning, North Carolina neighbors could be enjoying the best driving conditions in the country. According to AAA, Americans drive a lot. A national study found that just under 95% of the U.S. population drives. And those people take an average of about 2.5 trips a day. That's spending an average of about 50 minutes of every day in your car. This is a lot of numbers. You could be traveling around 30 miles every single day on average.
So we spend an average of over 360 hours on the road every year, according to AAA.
Okay.
Another study is showing we're lucky, though, to live here in Charlotte. One Wallet Hub study says Charlotte is the 26th best city to drive in. That's according to factors like road quality, traffic, road safety, and maintenance costs. Other North Carolina cities ranking even higher on the list, though. Raleigh considered the best city to drive in, and Greensboro and Winston-Salem both making the top 5.
Those people driven in Charlotte lately?
It is busy. But what I appreciate about Charlotte, when I lived in Boston, it was like you were on 93 and you couldn't get off and you were stuck. At least Charlotte, there are like back roads and side roads that you can get off on if you need to.
But people, if you talk to people who live in Lake Norman area and you come in 77, you don't have any options.
Oh, yeah.
If you live in the city of Charlotte, I understand it, but outlying communities, if you don't really know the back roads, you're stuck, and it could be really difficult.
It's hard coming down. Easier coming south, up to Charlotte.
If you're coming out of South Carolina over the bridge there's only a couple options there, too. So
hey, quality roads, though.
Yeah.
Quality roads, at least.
We got the quality. That's it.
All right. South Carolina lawmakers are working on a compromise on an abortion bill. A committee is trying to settle the differences on competing bills passed weeks ago by the House and Senate. The Senate's version bans almost all abortions after 6 weeks, while the House version bans all abortions except for a few exceptions, including rape, incest, and the health of the mother. Time is running out to make changes before the November 13th deadline. The committee will meet again next Wednesday, the day after the election.
WCNC Charlotte.
Weather is a kind of science that you get to see and experience every day. And I think some people don't even realize how much it affects them. That weather has a huge impact on how it threatens your family, your livelihood, or your home. So I think it really is one of those defining things we do that really affects everybody in our community.
See the difference.
That process of giving you a warning ahead of time and keeping you and your family safe is really important to me because I live here too. It's my family, it's my friends, it's my neighbors.
If you're not looking forward to making a turkey, mac and cheese, and all the sides for Thanksgiving, the solution may be here for you. NBC's Sam Brock has more on the growing accommodations restaurants are making for the big day.
With just 3 weeks left until Thanksgiving and prices rising on just about everything, gobbling up budgets, some families are considering non-traditional holiday options.
Eating out may be a possibility next year.
But even for traditionalists who like a good home-cooked meal.
That's the one thing I enjoy, to cook and feed my family. It's just a matter of having a good time.
There's compelling reasons to take everyone's favorite food fest on the road, namely the soaring cost of food, especially at grocery stores.
There's no question that this year, Thanksgiving is more expensive than ever before. Typically, you're going to save, if you go out this year, somewhere between 10 and 15%.
From the sides to the main event.
This is the turkey.
Oh. How big is that?
About 19 pounds.
Inflation is heavily impacting nearly every corner of your Thanksgiving table. Customers getting particularly lambasted when it comes to the turkey. A 20-pound bird up almost 30%, or about $6 from a year ago. With the recent bout of avian flu nudging prices up even more. The cost of potatoes rising 18%. Canned fruit and vegetables also up 19%. Restaurants like Red Rooster in Miami, with their Cajun spice smoked turkey and ultimate southern greens, hoping to capitalize.
We've already got reservations just flying in the door, and our phones are ringing off the hook.
They're also benefiting from the fact that food has risen a more modest 5.8% at restaurants versus nearly 10% at grocery stores. This business also figuring out a cheat code of sorts to save customers even more money.
We have a local farm that actually services the community, and that's been able to really help us with our prices.
As for accommodating demand, at a time staffing is challenged across the industry, Red Rooster is staggering worker shifts to make sure they're covered. Others are banking on higher holiday revenues to boost hiring. From elevated dining to traditional spreads to all-you-can-eat buffets, there are many ways to maximize value. Experts suggest looking for restaurants that give you unlimited portions to get the most bang for your buck. Make sure to also check out sites like Groupon for any offers with added savings. And if you're worried about missing out on leftovers, keep in mind that you'll likely be able to score big at the grocery store the next day, when most Thanksgiving items will go on sale.
So go out for Thanksgiving, have a ball, and then go shopping the day after.
Well, the Charlotte suburb is seemingly putting the cart before the horse, spending millions on a long-awaited project before securing the needed loan. As WCNC Charlotte's Nate Morabito shows us, they're effectively gambling with taxpayer dollars and leaving people asking, where's the money?
The city of Belmont's already sunk $8 million into its new recreation center. The city's supposed to pay for most of the $13 million project with a loan.